Is pornography cheating? I mean, think about it for a second. Is viewing pornography cheating on your significant other or your spouse?
You don't mess around.
Yeah, I just want to hop right into this. I mean, this is such a deep subject. I think we really need to talk about it, and I don't want to waste any time getting to it. Guys, welcome to Small Talk. This is where we discuss how faith fits in the big picture. And today I am joined by Sarah McDougall, who is an author of this amazing book entitled One Face. One Face. Tell me about this book. I've not read it all the way through, so tell me about it.
Why did they tell you to be the one to?
I know, right? It's like, hey, don't finish the book,
sorry.
but go and talk to her.
If you haven't read the book, what are you doing here?
That's a good question. Now you have me questioning my entire life. Why am I
I'm
here?
just questioning your integrity sitting here.
Oh,
right
mercy. I need to shed the mask, right?
You need, yes.
That's
so
a subtitle. Shed the
yeah.
mask, own your values, and lead wisely. One Face. Tell me a little bit about this book.
So this book was actually written during a really difficult period of time in my life, when my life had just completely fallen apart. And I had found out, I had known for a while, but it had just gone public that the person I was married to was an addict. And not a cocaine addict or an alcoholic. We're talking a sex addict, a pornography addict. And so when I had just started writing this book the month or so before all of that went public. And so the book One Face, it is not about, I did not write about that particular part of the journey, but I definitely wrote about lessons that I learned in the process of learning to and practicing how to own your journey, how to take ownership of the values that drive you, and how important it is to know what those core values are so that you can make wise, informed, regret-free decisions. I think we're going to talk about that another time.
Yeah, I'd love to.
That's a whole different subject. But also the freedom that comes with shedding the mask. You see, so many of us, we live with this dichotomy between our internal and external realities.
Right.
So we have this public message where you advertise yourself as a certain type of person. And this can actually apply. I actually wrote it for business leaders. That's the tone of the book.
Okay.
So but it applies whether you are a stay-at-home parent or the CEO of a big corporation. The principles are the same. If you have a misalignment between the internal reality and the external brand, the public message, then you're going to be spending at least some of your energy keeping the internal reality secret and putting out fires. Instead of spending that energy thriving, performing, being productive, and becoming fully who you were created to be. So when we're living behind those masks, when we don't really know what the core values are that drive us, we haven't articulated those, and we aren't letting those inform our priorities, then we get things upside down. We say yes to stuff we should say no to. We say no to stuff we should say yes to.
And it sounds like we're using quite a bit of energy, as you said, kind of keeping these two lives separate.
And put so much energy into being like spread eagle guard in front of the door of the closet of your skeletons. Whereas if you're just open about those things, and does that mean you're never going to screw up? No. Does that mean that you're going to be perfect? No. It means you're going to own it when you do. I can think of times just in I'm just thinking of something right now where I totally mishandled a situation. And I'm in the middle of working it out with a friend where
you're owning that.
I am having
mistake
to own
or whatever
that
it was,
and how I handled that. And that's just, that happens because we are human. So it isn't a call to perfection. It isn't a call to pretense. It's a call away from the pretense of perfection and to being more real with each other.
Being who you really are. So, one mask, just all up front. Now, it sounds like this book is, as you said, more than just for an individual. It could be used in a corporate setting, for business. Even running your household. And so if you're interested in this book, we've got a link right above. Check it out. But Sarah, actually, I want to talk to you about something you just mentioned. I want to talk to you about what you were going through when you wrote the book.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I open with the question, is pornography, is viewing pornography cheating on your loved one, whether it be a girlfriend, a boyfriend, or a husband or a wife? Now, you mentioned that you wrote it during a time, or you began writing it, and then it came to light that your husband was an addict. He was a sex addict. Elaborate on that. What was that addiction, and how did it impact you?
We got a lot to cover.
Oh man! By the way, if you can't stomach raw and just unfiltered and
if brutal and
real,
unvarnished ain't your thing, then you might want to skip to the
click
next
off
one.
Now. Find your way to VeggieTales. This may not be for you. But tell me a little bit about your story.
In my speaking and talking, I generally refer to this subject from the context of a wife to a husband.
Okay.
But I just want to lay some foundational groundwork right now. So when we're talking about addiction to pornography, sex addiction, the role of pornography in today's culture and world, I want to state right at the beginning that I think we both know that pornography and pornography addiction is not just a dude's issue.
That's right.
There are women who watch pornography, and there are men who watch pornography, and there are men and women who do not. Right. And there are spouses who are husbands who are in abusive relationships where the wife is the abuser.
Right.
And there are boyfriends who have abusive girlfriends. But for the sake of not trying to use all the pronouns and all the different possible options when we are discussing it, at least for me, because I'm sharing from my context as a wife who was married to a male spouse, a husband, and as a heterosexual person, I'm going to be speaking about abuse from the wife's perspective.
Right.
So that does not mean that I am not aware or that there are not situations that are equally legitimate where the woman is the abuser or where there's not heterosexual pornography, those kind of things. So I just want to kind of cover that right from the beginning.
No, that's great. That way, all of our viewers, know that this is a subject. It's a blanket matter. I mean, it isn't just confined to.
It affects humans.
Exactly. So whether you're dating, or whether you're 17, 18, 19, or whether you're a 55-year-old male or female spouse, we hope this story is edifying, and by God's grace, you'll learn something along the way here.
Absolutely.
Please.
And I want to make sure nobody feels like I'm excluding another, like the other gender, or different ways of looking at the world, different orientations, just because, but my story is one of a heterosexual wife married to a husband, and this is the context I'm coming from.
Okay,
so that's my vocabulary.
So share a little about your story. When did you first find out? I mean, this must be a world changer,
It is really, and now we'll come to this again later, but now I work with a lot of spouses and girlfriends who are in similar situations to what mine was, and it can be a devastating reality.
Right.
The disclosure that you are not the only person in your significant other's sex life is overwhelming, especially in a faith context where we have some expectation of monogamy. And so now I understand that there are non-faith contexts where there is no expectation of monogamy, and that is a whole different ballgame. But for this program, we're talking about when you expect your significant other to be being faithful to you sexually, emotionally, and they are not. When you find out that they aren't, it is a devastating, earth-shattering betrayal.
Wow.
And so in my story, I was raised in a wonderful Christian home. My parents had their flaws, like all humans do, but they loved each other. They've been together for over 50 years now.
50
and
years.
I mean, that is like a mile marker in today's world. And I grew up in a home where there was absolutely no doubt that they loved each other and that they loved me and my sister. That was just, they have flaws like every human person.
Right.
And I have flaws, and everybody's got some flaws. But I was loved, and I grew up in a home where marriage and commitment was just unquestioned. It was a really big deal. It was a core staple of my identity growing up. And so I kind of assumed, I mean, I knew there was bad stuff out in the world, but I kind of assumed that was just how it was.
Right. This is marriage. This is what's been exemplified.
This is what it looks like.
This is what I'm going to inherit or have an experience.
Right. And, I was raised expecting that and planning for that and willing to commit to that. And so I just thought that's how it was. And so I got married like right after I graduated from college to a theology major who was training to be a pastor. And so here I had never planned on being a pastor's wife.
I was going to ask you that. When I grew up, I want to be a pastor's wife.
Yeah, no, that was not my life goal. I did want to be a missionary. And I wanted to move overseas and do humanitarian work. And I still do that.
So being involved with I guess, for lack of better words, gospel work or spiritual work, faith-based work, it's always something you wanted to do.
Oh, yeah. But being a pastor's wife, that was not necessarily how I thought that was going to happen. Right. Then I thought, God was, hey, this is where God's leading. This is what's happening. Yeah. So I married a pastor and went to seminary, finished seminary, got our first districts. But while we were in seminary, about 1 year in, I found out he was an addict. And now, a lot of significant others, a lot of girlfriends or wives, they find out by finding the stuff.
Right.
Or catching their significant other.
Whether it be on a smartphone or
on a computer. You stumble across some browser history and you're sitting there staring and in shock and feeling frozen or enraged or broken, whatever. Yeah. That wasn't my situation. In my situation, he felt bad and he actually told me.
Okay.
Which is a bit unusual.
Yeah.
And I think he genuinely wanted to be free of it. Okay. But at that point, I don't think either one of us, I certainly didn't, had any context for the nature of addiction.
Now, we're using the word addiction, and just so we're all on the same, playing field here, define addiction. How are you using that word? Is that it's a necessity? This person is obsessed; they need it daily, or how could we give someone some tools to either self-diagnose or to be able to identify addiction?
Well, that's a tricky question.
It is.
And I'm going to be right up front with you. I am not a clinician. Okay. I am not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I am not in any way qualified to diagnose someone. Right. So I can tell you from a lay person's perspective, and from someone who's lived through the fallout of this. Okay. Addiction takes place when something happens in your brain that when there is a false sense of need for something that is toxic to you.
A false sense of need for something that's toxic to you.
And it tricks your brain into thinking you need this and you want it. And that's the deceptive part. Because before you're willing to admit that you actually need it, you want it. And you want it, but you tell yourself you don't need it. And you're lying to yourself. Right. And anyone who's worked in addiction and who has lived with an addict knows that addicts lie. When you are the addict, you minimize your actual need for it to make yourself believe that you are in control of it. Right. It is not in control of you.
You're lying to yourself and others around you. You're lying to
yourself, and you're creating an alternate reality of how in control you are of whatever this thing is that's got its tentacles.
I can quit anytime I want to.
Exactly. Right. I could quit tomorrow. You maybe you're smoking a cigarette. I could quit tomorrow if I wanted to. Right. But I'm not gonna. Right. Well, but if it comes down to actually doing that, that's when you realize how big the chains are that are binding you. Yeah. So with sex addiction, it's very different from alcohol, crack, weed, meth, because those are external substances that you put into your body and your body has a physical reaction. Sex addiction is a way of thinking inside your head. So if you're an alcoholic, as long as you don't drink alcohol, you are staying away from getting drunk. Right. But with sex addiction, with pornography addiction, all you have to do is start thinking about it.
Right. The excess is just...
it's right there. Yeah. And when you have started to put those visual images in your mind,
it's easy to recall them.
You can access those files anytime you want. So even if you stop watching something on a screen, which I would say needs to happen. You need to stop watching these things on the screen. Right. But even if you stop that, you can still be actively addicted by recalling those things and turning that sense of sexual arousal that God created to be experienced in a loving, monogamous, committed relationship between two people by experiencing that into yourself. And so when you're doing that with yourself, what is intended to be love that is giving instead of taking, true love
Right.
We were talking about this earlier.
Yeah.
True love is, the essence of true love is you giving of yourself to someone else.
Right.
The essence of great sex is you giving of yourself to someone else and that person giving of themselves to you.
Right.
But when you are taking, it's no longer love, it's lust.
Right.
When you are consuming instead of building up, that is not true love. Pornography is consuming. I mean, how real are we being here?
Oh, we're being very real.
Really real?
We gave
So
you full disclosure. We gave you a little warning there.
Can I use the real words for this? Okay, so
absolutely.
Pornography and masturbation are taking from yourself, and there's no one giving to yourself. You are taking away from yourself. You are spilling yourself
for yourself.
So
something that was intended to be selfless and giving has become selfish,
toxically inbred.
Okay.
So does that make sense?
It makes sense. So when your mind is conditioned to I need this, I want this, I need this, that is in the threshold of addiction.
Absolutely.
Okay. So
and they say, the studies say, that sex addiction is more addictive than cocaine. It's harder to stop.
And for me, thinking about that, that's pretty heavy, But thinking about it's biological though. So of course we're going to want something that we're programmed to want. Sex is beautiful. In fact, we've done a segment here on sex. We'll link it as well. Sex it's created by God. It's something given to us in the Garden of Eden. It is beautiful, and it has been totally hijacked. But it's a different story there. So you find out within the first year of your marriage, by confession. So there's some redeemable quality to that, right? Your husband tells you, listen, this is what I'm struggling with. How do you react? What are you feeling at this point?
Oh, I was numb.
Wow.
I was just in shock. Nothing had ever prepared me for that revelation.
Okay, so you were numb. Is that numbness a result of anger? Is it just a mixed bag of emotion, or?
It was a long time ago. As I think back to that, probably part of it is just how I, my personality, how I process big news. When I get big news that's super life changing, I don't have a lot of feeling right away. I'm just processing options and possibilities and worst case scenarios and what does this mean, and that's just
1,000 ideas going at once.
My brain circuits go on overload. It's just like ooh, and I'm just breathing out.
Right. Externally, you shut down, malfunction.
Yeah, like if I was a robot, all the circuits would be shorted out. I'd be like.
So he's probably like, "Whoa, okay, are you live there?"
Oh, I think I just probably went silent. I'm just like, what? What?
Yeah.
And so it took me a while, and then I went through the normal stages. There's the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And I would not necessarily say that all 5 of those are necessary stages when you're talking about understanding pornography, particularly acceptance. Yes, there's some acceptance that's involved with that. Let me just walk you through them so you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So first, there's just this can't possibly be.
That's denial.
This. How is this happening to me?
Right.
This can't possibly be my reality. This is like a cruel cosmic joke. How is it possible that I am married to someone who is a spiritual leader, pillar of the community, upfront preaching?
That's pretty heavy.
Telling other people how to run their lives, doing marriage counseling to other people, and like we're building this life and this ministry, and this can't possibly be happening to me. So you live at first in this just numb shock of trying to pretend it's not happening. And then after that, you just get mad. Like, how could you do this to me?
And I would imagine that question would be towards God as well.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
I mean, especially, I'm just trying to be empathetic here for a moment. You married a pastor. You mentioned earlier that you've had these desires to be a missionary, to do gospel work. And you're like, whoa, how did I get dealt this hand, right? I mean, that's how I would feel in those shoes.
When was the last time you read the book of Job?
Oh man, it's been a while.
And there's some pretty heavy duty Psalms where David rages at God.
Yeah.
I've had it out with God over the years. I will not even pretend that there haven't been times where even with my counselors and people that I've gone to for mentorship and guidance in all of this healing and journey, where I've just been like, okay, God, I was that girl
I went
that
through the checklist.
saved myself.
Yeah.
I asked for you to give me the husband I was supposed to marry. I trusted all this to you, and you gave me this?
Right.
How did you do this to me? And it's hard not to sit and say, this is God's fault, because I didn't even pick this situation for myself. I trusted it to your divine hands. I said I was going to let you be in charge of my life, and you gave me a dud.
Wow.
And so, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I hear, because, I work with hundreds of women who are going through different stages of this, and all of them have had at some point or are in the middle right now of this wrestle with God, like, God, why me?
Right.
And some of them have things that they've done in their own life where they're like, oh, well, maybe this is my fault. Maybe I deserve it because I made bad choices. And that's a different path, which is no more valid than God thrusting it on the person who didn't deserve it in the first place. Because here's the thing with that. And this is what I've learned over the years.
Okay.
God didn't make my husband an addict.
Choice. It all comes down to choice.
It all comes down to choice. Yeah. God is a God of free will. So even if I look back and I say, yes, God said marry this person, that does not necessarily mean that that person is going to make faithful choices to me the rest of my life.
Right.
And I am only, and we're going to come back to this.
I hope so, because that's a really
this is huge,
point.
and it impacts so many things. I am only responsible and able to make the choices that I am able to make for myself. I can't make your life choices for you. I couldn't make my ex's life choices for them. When my children come to the age of accountability where they are able to make their own choice, I can't force my choices on them. We are only able to choose for ourselves. And God only respects the choices we make for ourselves. So if we choose to reject his healing power, if we choose to say, God, I got this. I don't need your transformation. I don't want your transparency. I don't want accountability. He says, okay, you can keep on being an addict.
And inevitably, our choices affect other people. They impact the lives of others. Just
and
as the drunk driver's decisions will impact the lives of the victims or innocent bystanders. Same thing in the situation as well with addiction, with pornography. So talking about choice, what did you choose to do when you found out, or what did you do?
Goodness.
What happened there?
Well, at first, there's that numbness when you find out, and then there's this anger, and you're duking it out with the divine, and sometimes with your spouse, and you're trying to figure out, what do we do next, and then there's this bargaining, like, okay, well, in the bargaining when it comes to understanding pornography addiction and the way that addiction plays out in close relationships, bargaining very often takes a very unhealthy form.
Now, what do you mean by bargaining? Is that compromise, or is that? Well,
it can be, but if you're dealing with, say, a death, bargaining with that reality is a whole different thing than when you're dealing with an ongoing life situation. So a lot of times in that relationship with an addict, and I'm using the term relationship with an addict based on the assumption that the person that you're married to is addicted to pornography. It's not just like a one-time thing where they saw some stuff and then they felt bad about it and they came and told you, and then that never happens. But
we're talking
repeated
ongoing
use is addiction, full stop. And repeated use and repeated, how do I put this the most effective way? Repeatedly engaging with sexual content outside of the person you're married to for your sexual gratification is cheating.
Right. So we're answering the question. Right. So my initial question was, is pornography cheating? Now, outside of yourself, we can put some biblical context or some support behind that. What grounds do you have to say that
Okay, so I mean,
is there a verse? Is there a passage?
Oh yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, there's Jesus talking about if you look at a woman to lust after her, you're committing adultery in your heart, and you are breaking the Ten Commandments.
So we're talking Matthew chapter 5, straight up.
Exactly.
If you look at a woman who lusts after her, you've committed adultery in your heart.
Absolutely.
So, ladies, whether you're dating, men, whether you're dating or whether you're married, if you're in a committed relationship, yes. Ooh. You're stepping on toes now.
Now, what if you're single? Yeah. You're not in a committed relationship to someone right now.
Okay.
Does that give you free license to lust after anyone else?
Technically, are you sleeping around at that point? If you're watching pornography? That's interesting.
That's a question.
Hey, let us know what you think about that one. Drop that in the comments. Okay.
I mean, I think we're giving the foundation to answer that question without any lack of clarity.
Right. But that's interesting. We'll leave that one open.
Yeah,
you let us know what you think on that one.
Yeah. But yes, so with this whole bargaining thing.
Yeah. Well, what is bargaining?
So when you're looking at bargaining from this perspective, this recovering from the disclosure of betrayal
or discovery
discovery. Yes, disclosure or discovery. Disclosure is when someone tells you themselves. Mm-hmm. Discovery, you stumble on it yourself. So when you're dealing with a bargaining. See, very often in a relationship with an addict, you may not even know it, but there are very abusive tendencies.
Interesting. Of the one addicted.
Most of the time will have some type of abusive tendencies because they are not living a transparent, authentic life.
They're wearing two masks.
You cannot be, I mean, my book is one face.
Right.
You cannot be secretly harboring an addiction and living with one face. It's impossible.
Right. So inevitably, the fallout of that is these abusive tendencies that you're going to talk about.
Yes, absolutely. And we'll probably, I don't know if we'll get through all of them in this segment or if we'll discuss some of them in the next one, because I know we have more than one program on this. But in the bargaining kind of thing, you have this abusive dynamic where the addict, as all addicts do, try to place blame for their addiction on the people around them.
Interesting.
And usually the people closest to them take the brunt of the fallout.
Interesting.
So in that, you're already looping, and a wife or a girlfriend who's just discovered this is already looping around in the I'm not good enough loop.
If only I were more attractive or thinner or...
Why would he go elsewhere for satisfaction, for sexual gratification? I mean, and so you start by telling yourself, I obviously am lacking something.
So now this becomes a question of self-image, self-identification.
Identity, self-contentment, value.
Wow.
I am obviously of lesser value because I am not enough to fulfill his needs, gratifications, desires, wants, whatever. Wow. And so in an abusive relationship with an addict, there will be nuances where the addict implies that as well, as if you don't already feel that way.
Right, because of the situation.
Because of the situation.
Now you have the situation and you have this abusive behavior of maybe you're not good enough.
Yeah, if you were blonde instead of brunette, if you were thinner, if you were curvier, if you had bigger boobs, if you were skinnier. Now
this is huge right now because
any of these things.
There's in the last 10, 15 years, there's been this discussion on media portraying self-images for these young women to, I guess, acquire for themselves. That just is totally unrealistic. There's been conversations about Photoshop on these, these photos of these women. And it's creating
pictures of the real woman.
Right.
She looks just
so it sounds like in this bargaining stage, what's really tested is identity and self-worth.
Absolutely.
And I think that just shows the importance of first having your identity rooted in Christ. And that's a whole different conversation that I wish we had time
values,
for.
But that is not for today. So you'd have to link to the core values conversation.
Link to that video.
Yeah. Which direction is that?
I think it's going to be right here.
Right there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's this impossible sense of comparison.
Right.
And you know where that breaks down? Because you're human. You can't be plastic enough to compete with what's on a screen.
Right. Well, let that sink in for a second.
It doesn't matter how hard you try. Right. You will never be plastic enough to compete with what is photoshopped and surgically altered and
caught at the right angle in the right light.
Yeah, in the right light. And and completely prepackaged for maximum display.
Right.
And I mean, there are statistics and articles that talk about how porn scenes, you can have one scene that's shot over 4.5 days.
Wow.
And then it's delivered in that one scene, and you're supposed to think that this is realistic. So it's plastic.
It's almost like it creates this delusional mindset of expectation for men, or
of course,
this is what my spouse or my girlfriend, or even for women. I don't want to, we talked about, we don't want to say that this is just from one sex, but women will create also a delusional, expectation for their boyfriends or for their husbands. And by the way, you're not supposed to be having sex before you're married anyway. Just
that's in the Bible.
That's in the Bible. That's not for me, right? No. So it's just throwing that out there.
You sounded like that was your own idea, though.
I did. I confess I did. But
just
word of God.
Tossing it.
But
so it creates this delusion,
right?
This plastic expectation,
and now you're comparing yourself to this unrealistic.
As a wife or a girlfriend, you're comparing yourself to this unrealistic thing, and again, I'm speaking from a woman's perspective.
Yes,
so a guy is comparing his expectations to that. And on a side note, there's data released now that from the age of between 8 and 11 up, the whopping majority of children are getting all their sex education from pornography, which means they're growing up without any tools of emotional availability to be able to filter through what's plastic and what's real. And that is what they're being programmed as believing is normal.
Wow.
So that's just kind of dropping that bomb on
heavy.
The side. But moving forward, so in that you're being looped around with this idea as a woman that this is because you're not good enough. And we'll talk about some of the lessons I learned a little bit later
I'd love to hear
with
those.
that. But there's this blame that if you were X, Y, Z, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, different from who you are, then he wouldn't be an addict. And that, girls, is a lie.
Wow.
Because when someone is addicted, they would be an addict no matter which woman you are.
Let's just let that sit for a moment, because that's heavy. That's heavy.
If someone is addicted to pornography, addicted to sex, they're going to be an addict no matter what you look like, who you are, what color your hair is, how big your boobs are, how skinny you are, how curvy you are, how adventurous you are, how well you laugh, how smart you are, how dumb you act. It doesn't matter who you are. Any woman that man is with, if he is an addict, he will still be an addict.
Wow.
It has nothing to do with you.
Wow.
And that is the biggest truth, that is the hardest thing to accept and to let that soak into your soul, that God still loves you, that you are a woman who is a beautiful daughter of the universe, that it is not because you are too fat or too thin or too this or too that or not enough of this or that, that made this your significant other an addict. That is a sin problem that is in his mind.
And was his choice or her choice.
And the result of her choices.
Ultimately, your identity is in Christ, and Christ sees you as someone who is worthy of his own divine life. Let that soak for a moment. We're going to pause here for this first segment. The questions raised is
I think we got through one paragraph of our notes.
We maybe did. So if you guys want to continue on, I'm so sorry. You know what? Follow us into our next segment. Our second segment, I'm going to ask you the question, what did you learn from this? And so we'll be asking that question and hearing back on that one.
Yes, 3 super important lessons.
Oh, wow. Well, let's dive right into that.
Alrighty.
We'll see you next time.